Today on the Transformation Project, we are so excited to be speaking to Janet Testaz, known affectionately as JT. JT is a practitioner in nutritional medicine and the founder of EcoLove Wellness, a holistic movement centered on health and vitality, not just in the physical sense, but an awakening of the mind and soul too. As a holistic nutritionist and mindset and self-love coach, JT believes the body is equipped to repair itself when given the right tools and some genuine self-love. But she would never have come to this realization without her own life-altering health scare. In 2010, at just 26 years old, JT was diagnosed with a rare malignant tumor on her kidney. For 5 days, as her health worsened, doctors had no idea why her kidney wasn't functioning. In recovery, JT was stuck with the realization she had little connection to her own body, and it dawned on her that the way she was living was making her sick. She began embarking on a journey of self-healing that allowed her to see just how holistically the body works, the food we eat, the way we move and think, and more importantly, the relationship we have with ourselves. After realizing how much her lifestyle influenced her health, JT began discovering her new, vibrant self, unearthing new depths of strength and vitality, and a fullness of life that has driven her to help others see the same triumph over illness. JT now actively helps women balance their hormones and reestablish a strong, loving relationship with themselves so they can live out their best life. Her own experience with adult acne, hormonal imbalances, digestive issues, and gut problems, combined with her training in nutritional medicine, gives JT a practical and personal understanding of the issues involved. Using life-giving foods, emotional management tools, and reestablishing a connection with the amazing world we live in, JT is dedicated to sharing her knowledge and enthusiasm for complete, vibrant wellness to everyone she works with. And so, without further ado, let's get into today's episode.
Hello and welcome to the Transformation Project, a podcast and community for women who are looking to transform into the best version of themselves no matter where they are at. A place where you can listen, learn, and laugh along with us as we dive deep into different topics to help you live a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled life. Remember, we are all learning here together, and therefore the content and opinions of the hosts and our guests should not be taken as medical advice. Please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions.
So welcome back, everybody. We're so excited to have you here. And we're so excited to be speaking to Janet today. We have had so many questions all about hormones, and we know that we have one friend who is in the know about all those sorts of things. So Janet, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So you kind of got into this field specifically because of your own health crisis. Are you able to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's definitely been a journey. My catalyst for getting into what I do, because I'm a holistic nutritionist and transformational coach. So 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago, I was 26 years old. Up to that point, I'd say I was a normal girl in my 20s. I went traveling, I lived overseas, did the London thing, thought I was healthy, I say in inverted brackets, but also was partying a lot and doing a lot of things I guess women or people in their early 20s do. But I woke up one morning, I was actually at the gym and I had doing medicine, like exercises with the medicine ball, and I felt a pop. And had this back pain and thought, oh my gosh, I'm starting to get old, like what's happening? And
in your 20s?
In my 20s. and I also started to put on weight and couldn't quite just like figure out why. Like I felt really puffy and then had this excruciating back pain and was in agony and pushed myself through, had to go to work for a work meeting, pushed through, didn't go to the doctor, didn't listen to my body. And then 2 weeks later, I had the same pain and I ended up in hospital, I was throwing up. And they basically said to me, they took me from some scans and they're like, you've got a tumor in your kidney. And so I was I was living on the Northern Beaches at the time and in Sydney and got transferred to Royal North Shore. And five 5-6 days later, my kidney had to be removed. And so what had happened was I'd had a really rare type of tumor, which is called epithelioid angiomyolipoma, which basically is a really rare type of cancer.
Wow.
Yeah, but it was blood vessels and muscle. And what had happened was I'd actually popped a blood vessel, and it had grown within itself. And then I had this massive, like the size of a 30-centimeter ruler, growth from blood vessels and muscles in my kidney. I've got a photo of it actually. And so that was a big, shock to the system to get that removed. It was fairly, it was traumatic, but I remember being in hospital, and there was a lady opposite me who was a very obese woman. She had to have a double bed. She just had a hysterectomy. And I remember her family bringing her like McDonald's and food to her when she was in recovery. And I was just like, all right, something's not right here. And I remember looking around at all the people that were in hospital. I got taken down for a scan before I had my kidney out, and I had a panic attack, because it was like my life before me was like, I could see where things were projecting if I didn't make changes. And I was like, how the hell did I end up here? And this is not okay. I asked the surgeon when I could eat and drink when I had my kidney out. Now that I've only got one kidney, he said to me, just eat and drink as normal. He didn't ask me anything about my diet, about my lifestyle.
What normal is for you.
Yeah, what's normal? What is that? What stresses have you got in your life? And I actually had a lot of unresolved emotional trauma that I hadn't been dealing with. I was in a relationship I was extremely unhappy with. I was in a job that wasn't fulfilling, and I wasn't looking after myself. I wasn't eating properly. I was partying. I was, taking party drugs. I was doing all the things that but it's still like, oh, I'm eating a few vegetables, I'm okay, when really I wasn't. And so that was the catalyst for me. And I went looking for answers. I went, okay, what am I going to do? I think yoga ended up being like the first port of call for me. And I got into, at the time, I was really into property investing actually, and like growing wealth and that sort of thing, because I was looking for an out of my career and I wanted to do something. And so I was already looking for answers. And I remember I was at this seminar, and the guy did a health section. It was a 3-day seminar. I'd never been to anything like this before. And he did this health section, and he talked about water, and he talked about food and all these things. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've got a lot to learn. And so that was then the shift. And I went, all right, let's go. And so nutrition, when people have a health crisis or when they have any type of crisis, for a lot of people is the lowest hanging fruit. So I went into nutrition, but I also got really curious as to why I got sick, because I knew there was a lot of unresolved emotional trauma. I knew there was it was almost like I had this anger inside of me that needed to get out. And that's how it it exploded out of me, literally.
Yeah, I think it's incredible how people don't realize how much stress and emotions actually affect your physical health.
Oh, totally. If we don't move our emotions out of our body, they get stored in our body, and it ends up as disease, like dis-ease. And so that was how I got there. And I was like, okay, I got into curious, got really super curious. I went and studied life coaching, and then I went, okay, I also need nutrition. I went and studied nutritional medicine, and now I'm, working as a nutritionist and a coach. But I don't just do food. I've gotten really into, and in that process, step back a bit, I actually, as part of my own healing journey, decided to come off the oral contraceptive pill, which I'd been on for 10 years. And I had extreme issues coming off it. I had acne. I didn't get my period for 6 months. So there's a lot of work that I had to go through myself to really go, okay, I've got to work on myself and work on my own health. And that's what happens when you're a student of something. Often it's, you're on your own healing journey, and a lot of practitioners are like that. They're like, yeah, I've had this crisis. I've got to figure it out for myself. So I've gotten really into hormones because I've had lots of hormonal imbalances along the way with dealing with coming off the pill, the acne, and naturally have gravitated towards women and when I graduated, I was like, I don't want to do women's hormones. It's really complicated. I don't want to do that. And I've somehow ended up just keep talking about hormones, because everyone that comes to me, you know, a lot of my clientele are women that have issues with their period. They don't have, or they're putting up with their period that's heavy or painful, or they've got other type of conditions, and they just put up with it. And it doesn't have to be that way. But I also understand the struggle, because, you know, I have been through that journey myself.
Your story is so similar to mine. I came off the pill after being on it, I think, for 8 years. And didn't get my period for a year. The acne was like excruciating. Like, I thought so many times about giving in and going back on the pill, because I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't look at myself in the mirror. It's But going back to that, how did you work your hormones so that like you could get rid of that acne? Is hormonal acne, is it always one thing that usually like leads to that? Or
I mean, there's a few things when we're talking about acne that is going to drive acne. I talk about this quite a lot. Inflammation is one of the big ones. So inflammation, like long-term chronic inflammation in the body. Also the state of the gut. So there's a connection between the gut and the skin. And the thing that a lot of people don't realize is the oral contraceptive pill, it actually causes damage to the lining of the gut. It causes lots of different nutritional deficiencies, which are all connected to the skin. The other thing that can really drive it, if it's hormonal acne, is insulin resistance, because insulin is a hormone as well as cortisol. But insulin resistance can cause a lot of issues with hormonal acne, because, acne can often be also related to PCOS. Not always. People with acne doesn't mean they have PCOS, and vice versa. And there's different types of acne too. But when we're talking about hormonal acne, insulin is one of the big drivers. So there's this combination of different things that happens with inflammation, the gut not working properly. We've got this underlying driver of insulin resistance, which also drives inflammation, as well as, and then we talk about stress, like cortisol will also drive basically what cortisol does is it drives your testosterone and your insulin, which causes testosterone to be made, and more testosterone to be made in the top layers of your skin. And so then you make more oil, then you get more infections. So it's a vicious cycle. And then there's lots of things that will contribute to that through the diet and through lifestyle that are going to cause that to be worse. And that's the same with women suffering from PCOS.
That's crazy. I didn't know about the insulin.
Yeah. And a lot of people find intermittent fasting can be quite good.
Yeah.
For, I find I'm a big advocate for it. I think women have got to be careful with intermittent fasting, just because there's not one size fits all, and it can throw some women out if they go too far. It can cause the thyroid to potentially slow down. So there is a sweet spot. But when we're talking about acne, PCOS, anything that's insulin resistance, it can be really awesome tool, but you've got to find the right fit for you. Men respond really well to fasting. Women are a little bit more like they've got to be a bit tread lightly, and maybe you don't fast all the time, and maybe you only do it for a period of time, or finding the right balance. Is it a 14-hour or a 16-hour fast, but maybe more than that is too much and it sends you into a stress state. So finding that balance.
Yeah, that was definitely what I found worked for me. But I just think it's so interesting that when I was going through all this, I saw a naturopath and we tested my cortisol and testosterone and everything else, but we never even looked at insulin.
Yeah. I mean, she might have been thinking about it. She might not have communicated it, but from a naturopathic perspective, because, I trained at a naturopathic college, so I'm very, I'm a nutritionist, but I'm come from that philosophy. It's always something you're thinking about, but she might not have communicated it. But, testosterone, like androgens, which is your male type of hormones, are driven by insulin. So that's what's happening with women that are having too many androgens with acne, hormonal acne, PCOS, is that there's too many male hormones, and that's very driven by insulin resistance, like very. You could even be not overweight, like you could be not, like, not having weight issues and still be insulin resistant. And I think that's the thing that can be confusing sometimes, because a lot of people associate it with weight issues, but it's not the case.
So can I just ask, Janet, there's a lot of women these days that tend to be having hormonal issues. What's your take on why that's happening?
Well, I guess a lot of it is sort of just what we covered, you know, when I was talking about acne. There's this underlying driver, you know, I think a lot of women that have period pain, PMS, other symptoms or more chronic conditions, you know, such as endometriosis or, you know, fibroids, there's a couple of big drivers. Inflammation being the driver, not their diet not working properly, like getting enough nutrients in, being nutrient deficient, being chronically stressed. So, you know, rushing around and constantly people pleasing, not knowing how to set boundaries, not really knowing how to love yourself. Which
so many women struggle with that, huh?
Like, you know, like constantly, like we self-abandon and we don't prioritize ourselves and we don't know how to create a self-container for ourselves. We weren't taught how to set boundaries for ourselves, and we give. And society has conditioned us that way. So, you know, we have to give, we have to be the caretaker, like we're conditioned that way. But as a result, we also get conditioned to not create containers for ourselves, or taught how to ask for our needs. So when you're talking about a boundary, it's also asking for what your needs are, and as well as saying no. I think sometimes we can get confused and think boundaries is just saying no. It's not. It's also asking for what you need, asking for help, saying I need time, I need to rest. And so there's this cocktail really of things that can happen, that being one of the big ones, and then inflammation, the diet. And when we talk about the gut, I talk about the gut and liver with hormones. And when the gut's not working, the liver's not working, they work in conjunction with each other. And with a lot of conditions, there's this imbalance of too much estrogen, not enough progesterone. So when it's hormonal imbalances, things like endometriosis, period pain, PMS, fibroids, there's too much estrogen and not enough progesterone. It could also be the case with things like PCOS. But a lot of that comes from, first of all, the things that we're consuming in our environment that are called xenoestrogens. So they're things that mimic estrogen in the body. So things like BPA and phthalates in plastics, pesticides from our foods, different chemicals in our skincare and our cleaning care, you know, stuff like that, heavy metals. All of these things can contribute so that they act like they mimic the estrogen in the body. And then our liver and our gut aren't working properly. They're overburdened with, you know, things like having too much alcohol and chemicals in our food, and our liver literally can't cope. And so it will go, okay, we'll just deal with this later, and it just recirculates it around the bloodstream. And then the body will act as though there's more estrogen. So there's this combination of the gut and the liver need to be working really well. You need to be having good bowel movements every day. I'll talk about the poop. You need to be really supporting your liver and making sure that it's ticking over, because we've got things coming from all angles, you know, and it's, you know, they say now that this is a study that was done like over 10 years ago. There was over 200 chemicals in the cord blood of an unborn baby. Like they tested it. I don't know what it is now. Like I haven't seen anything, and I'm sure there is newer research on that, but 200 chemicals like in the umbilical cord, like what?
That's scary.
Yeah, it is really scary. And so, you know, when we're looking at that, it's like there's things we can't control, but there's a lot of things we can control and choose what we can put in our body and nourish our bodies with. And this all contributes to, this is why a lot of women are having these hormonal issues, is the combination of what they're doing with their diet and lifestyle, as well as the way they're managing their stress. Because cortisol is almost like the mothership of things that can drive hormonal imbalances. And our body will always prioritize making cortisol over making things like progesterone, because it's down on the system, rank system. It's called the progesterone steal, basically. and cortisol will take it. It will be prioritized to make cortisol. So when we're having this condition, it's like then there's this dysfunction that happens between the brain, between the adrenal glands, between the thyroid and between the ovaries, like they all communicate to each other. And yeah, that's what happens. So that combination, does that sort of answer it? I mean, it's such a big question.
Sounds like a perfect storm, really. And, you know, but I guess the things coming back to is diet, lifestyle, you know, finding ways to reduce stress and actually take a bit more control. And I mean, like I think I mentioned earlier, and we've done an earlier podcast on this. So I manage a wellness center where we do colonics, and you know, one of the biggest conversations that I have with my clients is about how important it is that they are eliminating from their gut so that their body can then start to work better. And then the other health benefits can come into play as well. But it's definitely a tool, not the answer. It's just part of the whole puzzle.
Yeah, totally. And I think get support, get help, find people that are on that same journey as you as well, that are on, you know, wanting to up level their health and make healthy changes and that type of thing, as well as professional support. Because it's really can be lonely when you start to go, okay, I need to make changes, and the people around you are resistance, because they will resist because they don't like change themselves. It makes them uncomfortable. People around you won't like it. So finding support, finding people that are like you, that want to change, that are, you know, as well as, you know, get professional support. I say to my clients, I like it at the round table of health. So you are at the round table. There's no head, and this is the mainstream medicine seems to be like, I tell you what's going on and you don't know, and you're like, oh, okay. No, it's the round table of health. So you've got, you know, you might have a nutritionist or a naturopath, an acupuncturist. You might go and you know, get some colonics. You'll have a therapist or a coach to push you, you know, and to help you grow as a person. You know, you've got all these different people in your world that are going to support you, and that's what we need. And we try and do things on our own. It can be really challenging. So
yeah, so good to have. It's really important to have like a good support team that you're happy and comfortable to talk to. People often say, you know, like you'll have to fill out forms for like the kids at school or whatever, and they're like, who's your GP? I don't have one. I can tell you my naturopath, and I can tell you, you know, whatever, but I can't tell you my GP. So I guess so many people are struggling and have like completely different periods that look completely different. There's all these different issues that can crop up. What should a normal sort of period and cycle look like?
Awesome question, because I think a lot of women don't know this. I didn't know this until I didn't really start to learn this until when I was studying, and no one taught me. Like, and bless my mum. My mum was a nurse, and she taught me the factual stuff, but she didn't teach me about what ovulation is, what to look out for ovulation, how important ovulation is. So with a normal cycle, first of all, ovulation is the key to a normal cycle. So you need to figure out if you're in your fertile years, are you ovulating? And the reason for this is because if you're not ovulating, then your hormones aren't at the right levels. You're going to have other sorts of issues, you know. So ovulation needs to be the first measure. So you need to, first of all, track your cycle. That's the first thing. Like, know how long is your cycle. So a normal cycle will be anywhere from 24 to about 36 days. If it keeps changing and fluctuating, that's not normal. That needs to be investigated. Sorry, my dog's barking at me. The other thing is your period should really show up relatively pain-free. So you shouldn't be getting massive PMS symptoms like mood swings and cramping and bloating and, you know, tender breaths and all those things. That to me indicates that there's things going on hormonally that are imbalanced, often too much estrogen, and maybe not enough progesterone as well. And your period should just show up. It should be relatively pain-free. It really, ideally, in a perfect world, shouldn't be pain-free. It should be pain-free totally. It should just arrive. And then your actual flow should be, you know, the blood should be a bright color to begin with. And then there shouldn't be any too bigger clots. So no clot. If you have any clots in your flow, like have a look, but nothing bigger than, I say, your pinky finger. Any bigger than that, you're looking at more estrogen dominance as well, and the liver's not supported. And you shouldn't be getting any symptoms. You shouldn't be having huge amounts of pain, anything like that. So that's what a normal cycle is. You also, post ovulation, your period should really arrive about 14 days after you ovulate. So say, for example, the average cycle is 28 days. A lot of women don't fit into this. Some will be shorter, some will be longer. Everyone's different. But ovulation will then be around day 14. Your progesterone peaks at about day 21, so 7 days after ovulation, which is why if you ever do go get progesterone tested, you want to get tested 7 days after ovulation. And then your period will start after that. So that's what a normal cycle looks like. Does that help?
Yeah, that also, like what you were saying, would have been really good to know for me 15 years ago. Like, my mom was awesome, showed me how to use everything, but like I had that intense period pain every single month.
Yeah.
Like before I got my first period, my mom actually thought I potentially had to go get my appendix out. She was like, this is a lot of pain. Wow. Like, yeah, it was one of those like, and then all of a sudden I got my first period. It was like, okay, that's what I'm going to have to go through every month. But when I fell pregnant, that's actually right before then was when I had my best period cycle, kind of like what you just described. Yeah. And that's kind of when I really started getting into it, but getting into your period and things like that. But I did start reading stuff about your seasons. Can you elaborate on the seasons of your cycle?
Yeah, so this is something I wish I got taught as well. When I was a teenager, it would have been really beneficial. So I think when you're looking at each phase of your cycle, there's a really beautiful way to look at it. And I found this really powerful, and a game changer for me is looking at each phase of your cycle as a season. So winter, spring, summer, autumn. So winter is your period. It's when your hormones are at the lowest. It's when you need the most rest. Like in winter, think about a bear hibernates and goes inward. Your temperature is at the lowest. You just need to, it's a good time to reflect. So when we're talking about brain function, it's a good time to reflect, go inward, maybe not be as social, that type of thing. Then spring is pre-ovulation, so moving into building more energy, getting more strength, like there's things that are happening. This is a good time for projects. Fasting is a little bit better at this time. Your brain is starting to like kick a bit more into gear, so your energy levels, but you're not in full motion yet. And then we go into summer, which is ovulation. So ovulation is when you're the most social, you're the best at communicating. It's the best time to present, to speak, those types of things. And obviously, like we have been living in a world that is being geared to the male hormonal clock, which is basically a 24-hour hormonal clock. So, when I first heard this concept, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a game changer for me. There's quite a few people now that are teaching this and speaking about this, because I went, oh my gosh, that explains why my brain doesn't work the same all season, like all the way through my cycle. And I was judging myself for it. And so when I'm in summer, I can communicate, I can exercise, I can do higher intensity exercise, but compared to my winter where I just need to chill. I just need to rest. I need to not be as intense. So after summer, then you have autumn, which is post-ovulation. And this is a longer stretch of time usually. And it's starting to get warmer foods because your temperature increases after ovulation. Like as soon as you ovulate, your temperature should jump. And this is one of the ways you can know you can ovulate. And so it's then ovulation is not just knowing about, whether you want to fall pregnant or not, or avoid becoming pregnant. It's also showing you that your cycle is healthy. So measuring your temperature and looking at that and charting it. There's lots of good apps around now that will teach you. There's also some amazing thermometers. But then your temperature jumps and it's only by a little bit. It's like 0.2 of a degree. And then your energy needs are actually higher, because essentially if your egg is fertilized, you're trying to start to grow a baby. And so your energy needs will be bigger. And so having more warmer foods, like more like root vegetables, those types of things, and giving yourself a bit more energy through just having a bit more food, but doing it in a form that you know is going to fuel you. So like, root vegetables, or maybe some more legumes and things like that, because you actually are hungry. And this is what happens with a lot of women. They'll start to get a bit leading into their period, and they're getting really hungry, but they're not actually eating enough, because they might be eating a certain way and it's like not suited for that phase of your cycle. You need a little bit more energy. For example, if they're eating low carb, so then they're not getting in enough energy. So once you understand this, you're like, okay, it's also the time to get stuff done, to complete, to get tasks done, to tick stuff off your list. So understanding this, then you can go, okay, I understand now what my body is doing and what my body's needs are. So then I can start to just change the way I function according to the needs of my hormones, the way I eat, the way I move my body. Leading into your period a few days before, you're probably not going to want to do as intense exercise. Like you just want to back off a bit. If you're into training, just back off 20%, maybe 30%. Maybe you need to have a couple of naps in the afternoon on the weekend, and then allowing yourself that and not making yourself wrong for it. So we've been conditioned, like I was saying before, this 24-hour man clock, which is the man clock is their testosterone and cortisol is highest in the morning. But that's when they can function the best. And that's when their brain is most switched on. And that's why a lot of men can get up early and work and focus really early. But we can't always do that depending on where we are in our cycle. And so there's time to really push, and then there's times to have rest. And it doesn't mean you don't do things, but you can start to put those seasons into your calendar. And then when someone rings you up, a friend, and says, I want to go, do you want to do this? And that you're about to enter your winter, you might say no. Can we do it next week? Like little tweaks like that can make a massive change. Because if you give yourself the rest before your period and during your period, it will change your whole energy levels in your cycle.
I love that you brought up the male cycle too, because when I first read that, I was like, oh my goodness, this is why I can't go at 100% every day. And it was so freeing for me to be, because I'm a bit of a type A. It was so freeing to be like, no, this is my winter. I not even like I'm allowed to do this. Like I should do this. And it was just, it was a game changer. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And just giving yourself permission and understanding that, there's times that we're going to be functioning better, and there's times we can talk to our partners better. There's times there's just going to be different. And it takes time to start to adjust to this way, but it can be a real game changer when you start to shift it and just change your diary a little bit.
Diary
a little bit.
Workouts, total game changer.
I actually liked how you talked about there are apps that you can use to kind of track and monitor your cycle, because I've had a hysterectomy, but I still have my ovaries. So I still have that cycle, and I still every now and then feel it in my body. But having an app where you can track it was really handy for me back then. And it's not something that I really even looked at post my hysterectomy, because I no longer have a period. And so I kind of thought, it doesn't really matter. But I guess I'm still in that state where my body's still moving around that cycle, and I've just got no idea now.
Yeah.
So I was actually thinking, just on a little deviation there, with the apps, like, is there one that actually talks about the seasons of your cycle? And because that could potentially be an amazing thing for young girls. Like, I see lots of girls that come into my clinic.
There's a book that Alyssa Vitti wrote called In the Flow, and she talks about this. A few other people have written about it in books as well, but she has got an app out. I can't off the top of my head remember. It could be, I think it's called Flow, but it is quite good, and it talks about different needs and seasons. I think if you're looking for an app, you want to look for one that is going to measure your temperature jump. That's my personal opinion, because if you can start to go make a commitment and go, okay, I'm just going to start to measure my temperature just to see when I am actually ovulating, because you would still be ovulating. And so you can still live according to the seasons. And a lot of women also find that their period is in sync with the moon. So their period will either start at new moon or around or full moon. And we also get in sync with each other if we're living together or spending a lot of time with each other.
My poor husband is like tapped out with women. It's him. And then it's like we've got 2 daughters and my mum-in-law, even the dog, both dogs and the cat are women. He's like, I'm outnumbered. Yeah. I mean, you can use the moon to also go, oh yeah, of course I'm ovulating. It's new moon or it's full moon. It seems to be different. What I've noticed is some women will be new moon, some will be full moon. It doesn't seem to be one, but there's definitely a sync with the moon if you're not on oral contraceptive. There's one thing to also point out is when you are on the pill, you don't have the hormonal cycle that you would if you weren't on the pill. Your communication between your brain and your ovaries goes to sleep, like completely. So this is one of the problems that happens with a lot of women get put on the pill, or they have the Mirena. Mirena's not as bad, but the pill is the worst one. But your hormones it's not real. It's not a real period because you don't ovulate on the pill. And a lot of people don't realize this. And then we get put on these things to fix the problem, and it doesn't fix the problem. It just masks it. It doesn't address the underlying issue, which is really devastating, I think. To think that we think that's the solution and it's not, and just creates way more problems. It
made it worse for me.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, what I love though is the shift where people are moving away from that, because I know when I was younger it was definitely, you go to the doctor, you get your pill, you get your tablets, you take the thing, and then it's all fixed, and then all of a sudden you get sick again and something else happens. So that I feel like, and potentially it's the industry that I'm in as well, but I definitely feel like there's a massive shift away from that. People are actually starting to want to look at the root cause of what's going on and then find solutions that don't necessarily involve taking a pill that's going to create a different problem. So it's good.
Yeah, totally.
Different topic. If you could recommend one book, is there one book that's your very, very favorite book or audiobook that you are loving?
I think if women want to learn about their cycle, more about the cycle or fix their period, there is a really good book called The Period Repair Manual by Lara Briden. I think that's an epic book. It's very in detailed and it's a big dive. Some people may find it overwhelming, but I think I really love it. She just writes it beautifully in terms of for people to understand. But in terms of other books, oh my goodness, I've got so many. Okay, let's keep it to hormones. There's a couple I really love. Way of the Superior Man, which is Deida, which is more about feminine and masculine energy. This is was a game changer for me to understand feminine, masculine energy. I still love that book, and just helped me understand that I wasn't enough in my feminine, and helped me understand the polar opposites of feminine and masculine, and how they work in synergy and how they attract to each other, particularly important like in a relationship, but also when you go from being in your masculine all day if you're working to then going at home and being around your family or people that you love and stepping into your feminine. And it goes back to that we've been conditioned to go more into our masculine, and really understanding that there's a real power in being in your feminine presence and your feminine essence, because we've all got an essence. We're either feminine or masculine. It's not about gender, but really understanding that and using that to your advantage. So Deida, Way of the Superior Man. And there's another book that I really love, which was a game changer for me, called I Love Female Orgasm. I also wish I learned that when I was 18, because there's that one thing that they talk about.
They do not teach that at school.
No. And it's about pleasure, and it's about understanding, you're just all about sex really, but from a pleasure point of view. And I really was like, I wish I also read this when I was younger, because it really shifted my perspective around sex, around shame of sex, because there's a lot of shame around female anatomy, like vagina, and there's also trauma stored in our cervix and our uterus. Like we have a lot of trauma that can be stored in there, and really understanding the power of really becoming more comfortable with your body, understanding the importance of pleasure, understanding how this affects your hormones. But that's a really like a game-changing book. Probably not one you'd give your teenage daughters, maybe when they get into their 20s, but really awesome. So they're my 3. Sorry,
Awesome.
I need one.
Nice.
Sometimes it's really hard. Thank you so much for that. I think we were talking the other week off the podcast just about how awesome it would be to kind of start getting a list together of, our guests and their favorite books and get a little, book list going, because we're so excited about people that we're able to bring on and pick their brains, and everybody has, their own speciality, but then outside of that, books that they read that have changed their lives. So we're really excited to do that as well. Now, JC, if people are looking to get hold of you, how do they get in touch?
Yeah, so you can check me out on my website, which is ecolovewellness.com, or on Instagram, which is janet.testaz, or Facebook. You can look me up, Eco Love Wellness, or I've also got a free Facebook group, which is called the Wellness Project, Master Your Hormones. And I talk about dive a lot more into the ins and outs around hormones, around managing stress, metabolism, those types of topics that a lot of people feel lost on.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure having you on.
You're welcome.
I think we've all learned things. We've been on 47 years, still learning.
Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Transformation Project. We hope you learnt something just like we did today. If you're loving what you hear, please make sure you subscribe to our podcast so that you never miss an episode, and make sure to give us a rating and a review. We appreciate it so much. Even more important, if you have a friend who you think could benefit from hearing some of the information that we speak about, please make sure to share it with them so they can join you in the conversation as well, like we do with each other, about improving our health and well-being.